Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everybody can hear me. Sorry for the little bit of a delay, just getting things set up here, but my name is Sue Lodamore, and I'm Senior VP of Sales for the NFP Northeast region. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. This is the latest installment of our Breaking Benefits series. These series are really designed to be educational and are focused on exploring the next wow in employee benefits. So with keeping with that intent, I'm pleased to introduce today's program, which is Hyper-Personalization in Employee Benefits. And we live in a digital-first, data-driven world. Every aspect of our lives revolves around technology. And many of those technologies are LOT-based, which means they are constantly gathering data from the time we wake up in the morning to the time we go to bed. This data is being used by companies to create a better user experience and to drive more personalized product offerings. So for today's program, we're going to be discussing why it's important that employers embrace a digital-first approach and focus their efforts on driving a better employee experience. So today, I'm really pleased to have joining me, leading our discussion in this, are Mark Ryder and Justin Delvecchio. Mark heads our NFP innovation practice, and Justin is practice lead for NFP Insure Choice. So we're excited about the program. I do want to just say a quick few housekeeping items. We will have questions available to ask, or you could ask questions through the chat feature. I'll be monitoring that. But also we'll be asking attendees to respond to several polling questions that we put together. So we do want to keep this interactive, and we really appreciate your participation. So there'll be about 4 of them throughout the presentation. So with that, Mark, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Sue, and thanks everybody for joining us. So if you want to chime in so that I don't have to toggle back and forth with the chat and the Q&A, that would be awesome. If there's a question that comes up, you can throw it out there. Happy to have some interaction on this call. Cool part about it is I've done a lot of these where there's only been one-sided. So today I get to have my partner here, Justin Delvecchio, team up, and we're gonna peanut butter jelly this conversation and kick back and forth a few of the concepts around hyper-personalization. I work with Justin quite a bit on our Insure Choice platform, which is a digital marketplace that provides individual insurances to members of organizations that we support. So a lot of the topics that we're going to talk about today are things that we've kicked around quite a bit over the course of the last few years, and it'll be good to have some dialogue. So thanks for joining me, Justin. Although I don't see you on screen, I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. The digitization is not working out too well for me on the video front. So you had a better looking face on the screen here, everybody. So and let Mark take it away.
I was a little hesitant to have you join me though, because, you know, if you can see by this photo up here on the screen, Justin has some pretty nice hair, right? And I like to pride myself on that. So we got a little competition going here. He was kind enough to not be on video so that we didn't have to go tit for tat here. But thanks for joining me. So hyper-personalization, you know, interesting stat as I was reading up on some items recently around data and the use of data. And there's a stat out there around Netflix, certainly not part of the insurance industry yet, because there's so many new players coming into the marketplace. But they had a stat out there that said, and this was something that they estimated back in 2017, that the organization saved $1.5 billion per year back then in customer retention by using big data. And as I mentioned, you might say, well, where the heck is that relevance as it relates to benefits in this hyper-personalization conversation? I think the relevance is the fact that data is powerful, and data can actually be used and is being used by many companies to retain customers. And I would suggest that in the workforce today and the way in which we're competing for talent, there could be this argument that employees are customers, employees are users. And so, you know, throughout the course of the conversation today, we're going to challenge you as employers to think a little bit differently, maybe about your employees, and think of them as users and think of them as customers and see about, and we're going to challenge you to use data that's at your disposal to help change the experience that they have currently with their employee benefits package. In doing so, we're going to kind of walk through an agenda where first we're going to define what it is we're talking about. What does the word hyper-personalization mean? What is the word that many of the I guess you'd say words that are used in conjunction with hyper personalization means? What's it take to get there? Why is this so important? Why is this important now? And then, you know, we're also going to ask some challenging questions for things for you to think about. We're not going to provide the answer necessarily, but we might talk through them. But things to think about as it relates to traditional employee benefit models around offering coverage and offering benefits. And hopefully we'll leave this discussion with you, pondering ways to bring hyper personalization to employee benefits. I won't say this is the norm now, and I won't say that it is actually completely present in many organizations we've spoken to, but it is a trend that we're seeing become more and more popular on discussion, not just, and again, it's a trend that's prevalent within benefits and outside of benefits and every other walk of life that we're dealing with. So before we get going, we're going to take a stab at a poll here. And we're going to ask of everybody if within your organization, and this doesn't have to necessarily be within your organization, within human resources, if that's where you're joining from, but within your organization, is digital, the topic of digital, whether digital transformation, digitization, digitalization, there's many forms of the word. Is it something that is a topic of conversation within your organization? So I'm going to launch this poll and see if it works. And we appreciate your response to tell us whether or not it is something that is being spoken about within your organization. And we're going to let the poll kind of accumulate here. Thank you for responding and participating in this poll. This is the first one that I've actually ever officially launched myself. Sometimes it's
yeah, it's looking good. It's going, it's moving right along.
For sure. All right. Well, we're going to end the poll. Looks to be, and I don't know if you can even see this part of it, but the numbers we're seeing on the poll here, we're looking at 80-20 rule. 80% of the population out there has suggested that they are, in fact, having digital conversations. And actually, I can share the results here. 20% are suggesting that no, that hasn't something that they are, dealing with today, which is interesting. And it's somewhat, I'm going to say it's somewhat consistent with our research and what we're seeing in the business world and the insurance world and industry as a whole. Here's some cool stats. Between 2020 and 2024, the global investment in digital transformation will almost double. So there's a lot of money being thrown at the digitization of industries. 52% of companies, because of COVID, are having to cut back on a lot of their expenses, but 9% will make cuts in digital. That means they still believe it to be an area, despite being strained from an expense perspective and maybe a drag on their top line revenue. They still believe the digital initiatives that are in play are important enough to keep investment dollars there. And 80% of companies think digital will disrupt their industry. So 87% of companies that were surveyed, and this is a Deloitte survey, suggest that digital is going to disrupt. I like to think of it as enhancing. I think cup half empty is a disruption. And only 44% think they're prepared for it. So they know something's coming down the pike, but they haven't, battened down the hatches yet. And here's a number that, in the world today, we don't have consensus on anything. And 91% of businesses are engaged in digital initiatives. So close. We had an 80-20 that says 90. It's much better than it being half of what I have here on my screen. So appreciate your participation in that. And this is again a Gartner survey. So pretty interesting numbers there, Justin. And hopefully, I'm glad to see that they were consistent with what we're thinking.
Yeah, Mark, I was saying, these numbers are pretty high as far as people driving towards that digital space right now. What do you see, and why do you feel this is important now, and what's happening in the industry as a whole?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, Justin. So you teed up the next slide, and I'm going to drive this towards three main components. And there's certainly a lot of things. And again, I think it's important that we cover these aspects of it, because if you do, in fact, take this conversation to heart and you are really looking to shake up your benefits program and bring more personalization. I think there needs to be a good understanding of why we're sitting in the space that we're sitting at today, and why businesses are having to adapt and change and rethink what they're doing. Good to have some statistics behind it and some reasoning when you're going to talk to your executive team. The first thing is the growth of technology. It's a hockey stick curve. Technology is continuing to advance at a rapid pace. There's a professor, Kurzweil, a data scientist, that suggested that we're on the wall of accelerating expansion and return of technology. And he compares to the growth that we will have in the 21st century to being equivalent to 20,000 years worth of progress in the years past. So a century is 100 years. 21st century, you'd think it's just 100 years worth of progress if you compared it to, let's say, the 20th or the 19th or the 18th century. But in fact, the pace in which we're moving now, we're going to see 20,000 years worth of progress in technology across the board at this rate, which is pretty mind-blowing. But if you think about how rapidly the cell phone advances, and how many different iPhones you've probably had in the last 2 years, and the different features that have come out with those iPhones and what we do with them today versus what we did with them 10 years ago, it tends to make sense, but still mind-blowing nonetheless. Second thing that is super important and a huge component of personalization is availability of data. This is actually a stat that went back a few years now that IBM stated, but it's probably even become more powerful. 90% of the world's data have been created in the last 2 years. Mind-blowing how much data is provided. And the reason there is the fact that so much of the technology that's created is IoT based, which, Internet of Things, connected, cloud based, just to kind of continue to down the words that you might use to describe.
Mark, just a comment quickly, Andy. When I first saw those two stats, the growth of technology and the availability of data, these are just staggering numbers. I know we had some high percentages on where the drivers are going on the previous slides, but if people just take a moment just to process the growth of technology and the availability of data on here, these numbers are just absolutely staggering. You can see this is actually where we're at, not where we're going, but where we're at.
Oh, 100%. But an interesting stat to add that on where we're going. They project that by the year 2025, that there'll be almost 42 billion IoT devices worldwide. And there's a statistics that says every second, there's about 127 new connected devices coming, quote unquote, online every second. 127 connected devices every second. 4.1 billion. And you can sit there and say, yeah, that's nonsense. But then when you look around, just stare at your desk right now. Your watch is probably connected. You have a phone. We're connected on the computer. If you jumped in your car to travel out today, that's connected. Or if we're on a plane, because we're getting back to that world, it's just pretty, it's mind-blowing, yet you can start to see how that can add up pretty quickly. And then the last thing is, because of all of the data that's available, and because of the fact that although people might not realize how much data is out there, but they do know there's a lot of data being collected on them, it's driving a consumer to expect a more personalized interaction with a product. They expect we'll call it companies they're doing business with, to know who they are and to bring products and solutions to them based on who they are. And that's just become an expectation. It's been driven by a lot of different industries, but it's starting to now bleed into the employee benefits space. So when we hear personalization, which ultimately ties to hyper personalization, the topic of the call today, there's a lot of, I guess, words that go along with it. One of them being digitization. And so these next couple words that we're going to define for you are really the things you need to think about as you are, potentially driving towards this hyper personalization approach. And hopefully, we'll kind of be able to give you some examples so you can put some context around the words. So when we say digitization, Okay. What we're basically talking about there is organizing our information and bringing it into a computer, digitizing it. It's the most basic form. It's the blocking and tackling of getting to a point of hyper personalization or personalization. It's ground zero. It's step one. And I think, I don't want to confuse that with digitalization, which we're going to talk about, but it's important to understand. So what do we mean when we say digitization? So I guess the most simple example that we can serve up here to everybody on the phone would be it's scanning of paper-based documents with the main focus on converting paper to a file. That's all we're talking about. And, maybe many organizations have gone through that. I know in the insurance industry, it's certainly something that we had been active on and still are active on because it's a super paper-based world. So this is the blocking and tackling. Until you start to take these baby steps, you can't get to the point of hyper-personalization. It's just not possible. So word number one, or, factoid number 3 now that we've gone through, digitization, and how that differs from what we're now going to describe as digitalization. Okay, that's not a typo when you see that out on somebody typing. They're actually 2 different words that technically, mean 2 different things. So when we talk about digitalization, it's the use of digital technologies and digital data to impact how work gets done, to transform how customers and companies engage and interact. And you can kind of see where we're going because you know that hyper-personalization has something to do with the way you're going to interact with your employees and delivering benefits. Right?
I mean, so Mark, just in summary, you're saying one is getting things digitized, right? So you're able to communicate and work this way in this digitalization form, right? In summary.
100%. If you don't have your data in digitized, you can't start to utilize it. So here's a good example. If you want to point to, and we'll just carry forward what I had kind of thrown out as an example a bit ago. Whereas digitization is around, we'll call it aggregating or converting files. Digitalization is focused on processing. So in that same example would be, instead of taking a paper form and scanning it, it'd be creating a full, complete electronic process to complete that document online, to automate the process, not sending it over, having it filled out manually, sending it back, scanning it and putting it into the computer, but sending a form that actually has the ability to be filled out completely in a digital way, right? And all of that then allows us to start to act on and who hyper-personalize an experience. If we aggregate the data and we build process around it and workflow around it, we're actually then starting to transform, digital transform, I might even jump that phrase, our business. Okay, so we're talking about, gathering the data, putting a process on it, and then creating a whole new way and a whole new way of thinking of how we're going to do business. And that's where hyper-personalization comes in. It is the most advanced way of tailoring to meet and market to an individual customer. And it's created by using data to create better experiences. Data and AI and analytics and automation, but ultimately it's using the data that is now more readily available than ever because technology is what it is. And it's using that technology to rethink the way we conduct business and the experience that we're delivering to a customer. So a couple examples of that. Stitch Fix. Amazon, right? There's for anybody that partakes in likes their vino, there's Naked Wines. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but these are all platforms that have hyper personalized their delivery of their product. They've gathered data about their users. They've digitized much of their interaction, and they've used that data and the process to interact with the individual consumer personally with them based on what they know about them. I mean, Uber.
Mark, some of that personalization, but some of those personally, would that be like recommendations based on that data for these consumers?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say it. It's recommendations of interesting enough, people like you, but also actually you, because of the data they've been able to gather about you. So part of it is that people like you enjoy this particular wine, but it's actually drilling down further because the organization has been able to capture enough data about you as well to add into that to make it a little bit more, again, that's the hyper piece of it, getting it completely focused on who you are. And I think, consumer behavior, to be honest with you, and, user experience, how people interact, has driven a lot of this as well, because we're in a society right now that people are impatient based on having devices and technology and being connected 100% of the time, that they don't want to wait. They want data to be used that's gathered about them to be used to create a better experience. And they want that. They don't want to have to shop through and, tour, every piece of clothing. They'd rather Amazon present to them what they know that that this person likes. And I think, we as a society have kind of, I'll call it, driven some of this, not just the technology. And, when we think about that and we keep walking this down or backing into how this impacts employee benefits and employees, is that the insurance industry historically, which if we think of employee benefits, a lot of it is insurance driven, pretty low NPS scores, net promoter scores, which basically is a ranking of what a user's experience has been with a particular application. And all of these other organizations that without knowing them are data-driven organizations have a really high NPS score. People like interacting with them because they can get to the point quicker. Maybe it's a more fluid process. It's easier to use. All sorts of things and characteristics we could use to describe it. So you might want to say, how does that impact me? I'm an employer sitting here that said hyper-personalization and employee benefits. You talked about data, I get it. You talked about technology, I get it. And it gave me examples of Amazon and Netflix and Stitch Fix. Well, I'm here to challenge, and again, you can accept it and or argue it, which is cool. That's how we get somewhere. That an employee is really no different than a user when we talk about user experience, or a consumer. It just so happens to be they're labeled employees and they're working for you, but their experience, their expectation of the way in which they're interacting with the company is becoming bleeding over from the companies they buy from and into the company that they work for. And it's important to look at that statistics, because there's a war on talent like there's never been before, right? And we have to be concerned about what employees are demanding, because we're competing for them. And we have to rethink the way that we deliver their experience so that we are the employer of choice, just not because we have a job and we pay them. That, unfortunately, is no longer good enough. Justin, I think you made a stat when we were talking about this around maybe
I think
the idea of the past was about being happy to get a job or something, right?
Yeah, no, it's just saying, hey, we're lucky to have a job, we're lucky to be here, and now it's completely shifted where employers are lucky to have talent and are lucky to have the right people filling those positions on here. So that's really driving the behavior of individuals and what's going to keep them to stay in a particular organization or go elsewhere.
Some other things that we look at when we think about the need to rethink the way that we deliver benefits, again, a personalized, hyper-personalized type way, is that the demographics of who we're serving from an employee population is shifting. And you'll see some statistics here in a nice, cool little chart around the annual population between 30 and 60 years old by combined generations. And you're seeing a kind of a crossing point where the millennials take over the Gen X's and the baby boomers, and then when the Gen Z's join in. So, and that's now, that's not down the line. We're sitting in it currently. And so if the people we're serving are different, and the people we're serving are the digital native, and they're more predominant of the workforce, and they've been used to interacting with platforms in a personalized fashion. They've came out of the womb with a cell phone in their hand. Then we have to think that the way in which the experience in which that we're creating for them as an employee, which in part is the benefits that we're providing them, needs to change, needs to be rethought. And when we look at the workforce as a whole, and we start to peel back what it looks like, we're now sitting at a time where there's 5 generations in the workforce. And there's the whole idea of the digital natives and the millennials. And these generations have different beliefs. They appreciate different things. They are working for different reasons. They're in different stages of their lives. And we need to think about that. And again, that drives personalization. Can one benefit package fit all 5 generations? And sure, yes, health insurance is important for everybody. But when we step beyond the core benefits, and even the way they interact with the core benefits, how can we change that? How can we change that engagement with them? And all that was happening already before COVID hit. Right, that was happening. We were talking about demographic shifts for the last few years, but now that coupled with the Great Resignation, people waking up and realizing that they wanted more out of life, they wanted to change the way that they were working. They got a taste of this work from home environment and kind of a new normal for them. And I'm not saying they loved it. They liked every aspect of what was occurring to them, but there were certain features of it that they could appreciate more. And so now we have shifting demographics, right? War on talent, Great Resignation as a result of that. If these things and the way that the digital world and everything that's happening around it, if all these things added up don't make you think like, heck, we got to change our program and our approach to this because it looks really similar to what we've done for the last 10, 15 years, it's hard to then add any more reasons why to look at things.
Sure.
And this is another statistic that I think is pretty compelling. They call it the Great Employment Reset. What we're saying here is that used to be potentially you had somebody that you would hire and you'd spend a lot of resources to bring them on. And once they did, the likelihood that they would have been with the company for their entire working career was pretty grand. And this is showing that a large percentage have
a large percentage, Mark. I mean, this is over 70% don't have a career plan longer than 3 years. I mean, that's staggering. When you go through the process of onboarding or hiring somebody, onboarding, training, and their career plan or path is less than 3 years, that's a staggering number when you're looking at over 70% of this employment reset.
Yeah, a big number. And I would only have to imagine it's going to continue to shift out that way, because my bet would be the people that are they have it mapped out for 10 years are probably in the category of the generation that is the older generation that we just looked at on prior screen. So to couple onto that, employee experience trends. And again, I wanted to tie in user experience to employee experience. But only 30% of response, and this was a recent survey, so this is 2022 experience trend report through Qualtrics, 30% responded their company experience technology-wise exceeds or greatly exceeds their expectation. And they also are tying a strong link between the experience and key metrics of likelihood of engagement and likelihood to recommend for employment. So if folks aren't feeling as if their experience is a good one working there, not just comp, but if they're not feeling as if the employer is trying to create a better user experience, it's going to impact their productivity and ultimately their desire to recommend folks to join the organization. Here's some other expectations of personalization. and how that bleeds into HR. So these stats don't lie. 72% of consumers engage more when the message is personalized. 78% has a strong impact on their experience. 42% are annoyed, not just aren't not less likely to engage. They're actually annoyed the fact that the messaging wasn't more personalized to them. And when you think about HR and what we've done as an employers, they're late to the party. Only 77% of people believe their employers' communication is customized to address their personal needs. So this is out there. This is the perception. This is where people and buyers are coming in. This is how it's transcending into the workforce. So I'm going to actually throw out another poll that's going to be a little feeder for the next few questions that we're going to dive into as we start to discuss things to consider around your plan. We've just given you the backdrop. We've kind of defined some things. We took you down a path of saying, okay, yeah, I can understand why this is occurring now and how it could potentially impact me. So now we're going to move to the next topic or question here is, because of the Great Resignation and because of the shifting of demographics and because of the new mindset of people to moving in the growing gig employment population, do you envision in hiring your workforce shifting to be more contractor, 1099 focused in the future? And the question here I'm going to launch here, do you see it being more or less or about the same? So curious to see what kind of poll numbers we have here.
Yeah, we only had about 60% of the members on the call participate in the last poll, so hoping we could drive that up for this one.
All right. You jinxed it, man. All right. This is actually pretty interesting. I would have suggested that it would have been trending the other way.
And I'd also be curious, though, what percentage, how many 1099 contractors they're actually currently using, and if that's more or less since 2020, right? Because now that we're in 2022, I wonder how that's shifted.
Yeah, so we're gonna share the results here, and interesting enough, folks are feeling like it's going to be the same. That there's the tackling of the Great Resignation and need to bring more and more people on is not moving folks towards bringing more contractors in. Again, 80-20 rule. Should have figured. I just figured it might have been the other way. So it's an interesting feedback there. So thanks for your participation. We're going to hit you up with one more before we jump onto the next couple screens here. Let me just pull this up and move to the next. And this is going to be related a bit towards. Oops, sorry, I jumped one. Oh, no, I didn't. Maybe I have to add it a little bit later, but we'll come back.
You're going the right way. You're going the right way.
Yeah, we're fine. So the good news, I've kind of been talking about this demand for personalization and why it exists. The good news is, as an employer, you're actually in a super great spot to be able to act on it. We call it the recipe for personalization. You have what it takes, and you have what many organizations that are out there coming to market with new products would love to be able to gain, because they are confident if they can gain these 4 quadrants, then they're going to have a successful organization. They're going to be able to drive a great experience. One, a customer journey. So your employees working for you, you drive that, as a result of them being employed by you and receiving compensation, you're able to take them down a journey that could start with hire. So applicant tracking all the way through onboarding and then into an ongoing engagement with the organization. And most of the time that's driven through HR. You have data about them. If nothing more, you have demographic information, you have salary information, you have life event information. For some of you, and that's where my next question was going to be, you have more than that. You have claims information, and you know a lot about them. I want to believe you have trust. I mean, I think, probably statistics old, and I don't know if this has shifted. I don't have this stat around trusting of an employer, but I think the employee-employer relationship is a good one and built on trust and dedication to, I'm going to help further a company and I'm going to be compensated for it. And then, communication, which kind of goes hand in hand with the customer journey. These are the four components that really make this work. And again, I have to believe that you have all of these at your disposal. You may not be acting perfectly in any one of those categories. You might not feel that your data is organized as much as it could be, or that you have a really well thought out journey all the way through, but you have the ability to do so. And so the things to consider on how this relates to the employee experience and how to rethink your benefit programs. Well, the first thing about this is a pretty cool chart that I was able to find, Academy to Innovate HR, and it ties the employee experience. And we're focused today on the digital experience, and we're going to be focused on benefits, but it has more to do with that. I'm not being lost in the fact that culture plays a big part in this, and their physical experience on now, maybe their desire to be, a hybrid environment. All of that contributes to their engagement with the company. And their engagement with the company then has been proven to be able to impact or have impact on customer satisfaction, the end user of your company, profitability of the organization as a result of that, productivity, worker performance, and ultimately retention. Kind of stretching out that career path that we saw earlier was most people thought would be less than 3 years. They don't really know what their plan is, to saying, hey, I want to be here because my company, cares about me. They knew who I am, and they've created a pretty cool experience for me. Second piece of good news. I told you I'm not all spoils here. There's a ton of technology out there that can help you in every category of that employee journey and can help you really get a better handle and use your data to better that employee experience and to drive communications and messaging and drive the ultimate outcome you want. So there's a ton of that out there. This a cool, almost too busy, but purposefully busy depiction of HR technology presented by CV Insights. But the thing about it is, technology alone is not going to solve your problem. You can't just go and buy, pick 4 out of those quadrants and lay them out there and think you're going to have success. Digital transformation, digitization, and ultimately the personalization, it's not about necessarily just the technology, it's about the strategy and the data that you deploy. So the strategy you deploy and the data that you are able to aggregate and how you're using that information. So when we talk about things to consider and questions to ask, this is where we're going to start to challenge what many of us and colleagues of mine have grown up in the industry with, the mindset around how we offer benefits. The first thing is, under any initiative like this, I'm going to challenge that, you need buy-in. And so you have to ask yourself, if you're charging down the path of trying to figure out how to rethink a benefit offering and what to do, what steps to take. The first thing is, do I have, the right partnership in place with the executive team where they understand that the employee experience does equal a user experience, and user experience data that we presented drives better behaviors and more engagement. I mean, if they're not bought into that, then you're going to have a tough time convincing on investments into this space. But if there is that buy-in, and you need to get that up front. And it's sometimes challenging. It's a lot of drum beating, but you have to get that up front. The second thing is, organize your data. Do I have all my data organized so that I'm truly understanding who my employees are? And I don't say organized meaning because it's sitting in payroll or it's sitting in another system. Organized to the point that I've looked at it, and like we threw up those generation analysis. How many of you know what your generational analysis looks like within your organization? And this is actually we're at another poll question, because I'd be curious, and because we're going to talk about what kind of data are made available to you of the folks that are visiting with us on the call today. I'm going to launch a thing to see whether or not we are fully insured or self-funded out there, because That's self-funded. Huh? Okay, it was one of one. So let's see where we're going here. 50-50. We'll probably I'd be curious if this is 80-20, then we're going to have to question Zoom's
question
The
poll.
validity,
I'm
right?
going to question Zoom's polling.
And hey, Mark, I do want to just take this as a reminder to folks. The chat line is open, so I'm monitoring that to see if people have any questions. So
Awesome.
Thanks, Sue.
All right. So we're about 50-50-ish.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to end this poll because it looks like we're petering out a little bit here. Share results, just a real quick share. Looks like about half the population is self-funded. The other half is fully insured. You might say, well, why are we asking that? Because when we start to talk about what we know about our population and what kind of data, I just talked about organizing data. What do you mean? What data? Well, first thing is, sorry.
And Mark, just to one of the comments we came through is some groups are 50-50 self-funded, so they're partially self-funded.
Gotcha. So demographic analysis, that's the first thing. That's basic. Regardless of your funding strategy, again, the generational breakdown, your family, the breakdown from family status, gender, the employee types. So you have information that tells you a lot about your population. If you are self-funded, you have a claims analysis that knows where potentially you're struggling from a chronic disease perspective, and are able to, again, utilize this in crafting benefits and programs, should I say, that improve their experience. I take a step off and say also it would behoove you, if you have access to look also and to pull together loss run information, workers' compensation information, along with HRS data. So I know that most organizations probably have all this data in separate silos, but data by itself is just data, and it's not really informative. It's when it's brought together and started to be analyzed and dashboarded that it becomes information, and information that you can use when crafting. And I would also say Google Analytics, and you say, well, where does that come into play? The ability to create, and many of those technologies that I shared with you, as you are launching and driving that customer journey, make sure that the technologies have some type of analytics coupled to it that are allowing you to track the behaviors of your folks. And this isn't like, we're not trying to get creepy here. People start hearing about tracking and data and Big Brother, and we hear this quite often. But it's the way of the world these days. We want to know, survey, in my opinion, survey data is dead. It needs to be real data that's tracked by following a user, and using that data then help to better and better the experience that person's having. It's been
Mark,
done.
to that point, I think that data needs to be specific so it's effective, right? In order for it to get the participation in what we're trying to accomplish, it needs to be as accurate as we could possibly have it.
100%. Yeah, there should be, again, and you say, well, what do we mean by that? Well, if we're floating out information to our workforce, as we're driving out to them, wellness initiatives and newsletters, or things around just the, processes within the business, or benefits that are being offered, or there could be a variety of different topics. We're doing so in a digital way. Again, another reason for digitizing what you're doing. If you're doing things via paper still, and distributions of emails with PDFs attached to them, it's really hard to glean any information from that, because you don't know who downloaded it, who looked at it, what part of the document did they click on. You have no idea. You're flying blind, so to speak, on crafting where you're going to go and take your next step. So the more that you're able to hone in on who your people are, what they're struggling with, what type of family events are they going through, and what are their likes and dislikes, the easier it is to start thinking about a new strategy and benefits that might be well received.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark, real quick.
Hey, Mark.
Too.
Okay, if I could just cut in, sorry, but there was a great question from the audience, and I think this is probably not unique to the individual asking it. I'm sure a lot of other folks struggle with this, but the point was something I struggle with when it comes to employees and technology is to have, there are too many places for employees to go for different info. Paylocity, Employee Navigator, ERP time entry, expenses, etc. How do we still have the right technology for the job, but present it to the employee as one easy to use source?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I do think, listen, here's the reality of it. The point solutions are not slowing down. We talked about technology advancements, so there's going to be more and more out there. So you have to create a strategy that's universal enough and find a platform that can bleed into multiple solutions so that it aggregates the different solutions, brings them to the employee and the person and meets them where they are, and doesn't make them go searching. Because if you're making them search to systems and not driving them to one place where they can then maybe we'll call it leapfrog into the third party system based on whatever is appropriate or whatever the event is, then they're going to disengage. And you'll have spent a lot of time and money and effort in putting a program in place or a platform in place or a system in place that doesn't get utilization. So I think that goes along with the strategy of how are we delivering the program, how are we getting in front of them, how are we organizing our systems as well as our data. So I think that's a great question because there is a plethora of options out there. Everybody, and it's no surprise if you think about it, every one of those platforms wants to be the main system. Let us be the hub for everything that you do. We can do everything here because they want to own the experience. So thank you. So the next piece would be review the existing benefit programs platforms. Why is benefit offering structured the way it is? And this is going to maybe be, I'm not suggesting this is not an all or nothing. I'm not an advocate for like doing away with this general structure of a core benefits program, but there has to be a certain amount of time you ask some questions around. If you were not involved in benefits for your entire life and weren't brought into the model to say, hey, we have an open enrollment. It happens every November 15th through the 28th. Once a year, you can pick all your programs, and then you can't for another year without life events, obviously, in the caveat. Is that reasonable? Like, a colleague of mine out of the Northeast area, Jordan, was to say, if you were asked somebody to buy, all their products on Amazon one day, they'd really struggle. And so then you sit there and say, yeah, well, there are pre-tax benefits. Exactly, there are, and there are benefits that need to go through that and the Section 125 program. But there's a lot of programs that don't qualify for that, a lot of new benefits that are not pre-tax eligible, right? So is that the only thing that should, I say, the ultimate priority, that we're creating a package that allows people to put things through pre-tax, or are we creating a package that has valuable benefits? And again, I'm not answering these. I'm just posing these as questions to be thought about. Is payroll deduction still necessary for all programs? We love voluntary benefits. We love voluntary deduction. We love group benefits. We think they're great and they make a lot of sense in a lot of different areas, especially when you have participation and you're hitting the masses. But I will tell you, 15 years ago, when we were talking about voluntary benefits, the ability to do payroll deduction was like number one. I just saw a stat yesterday that says 94.6% of the US households are banked. Banked means they have a bank account. That didn't exist. That was not the statistic 20 years ago. I can tell you that. So is it necessary to always have your programs delivered through the main channel, or can you look outside that once a year payroll deduction approach and offer benefits that may be beneficial to the individual employee and create a better user experience and more personalized experience, but not an administrative burden on you as an administrator? And then this is another one: group underwriting outweigh additional choice. So if we don't have enough numbers to meet underwriting for a group sponsored program, which certainly the group sponsored programs are going to bring benefits like underwriting, preferred underwriting, maybe instant issue underwriting, higher benefit levels. There's a ton of value in voluntary benefits. We have a practice area specific and a centers of excellence specific to it. We believe in it strongly, but I would suggest that just because you don't have numbers, because maybe your population that is in one particular area, you might have 4 people that like pet insurance, doesn't mean it shouldn't be something you consider. Just maybe not consider it as a group program, but rather an individual program. So step out of the mindset of it always needing to be flow through the traditional means and try to create a larger, we'll call it menu. Speaking of menu, break down the traditional insurance created industry silos. A buyer, and I always challenge us, has no idea that it takes a certain license to purchase auto or sell auto, home, and renters, and a different license to sell disability and health insurance, and a different license to do investments. They just know they have a need. So, but we have an industry has created these silos. So step beyond that. And is it okay to offer auto and home or professional liability for the people that are my gig workers that I still want to support? I know that they're going to have these gigs on the side, but I want to support them. Trip cancellation. So, we start looking at personalization in employee benefits. And here's statistics around product mix. First of all, people post-pandemic are more likely and have said that they see a need for products more than they ever have before. And they think they're more important than they've ever before. But they also don't think that the current offerings are a large enough spread, and that maybe their employers are looking totally out for their well-being. So this is
Mark, I think that goes to your comment too about, open enrollment and these different life cycles and events that are happening where they may need a particular insurance product in that 2-week window during open enrollment. That might not be occurring for that particular employee. So you see on this menu here, there's a gazillion and one products on here that are going to catch an employee at a different life cycle or life pattern at that particular moment where they would want to take advantage of it. If it was only offered during open enrollment, that's where they could get stuck.
100%. 100%. And that kind of goes out to the next awesome segue here. The next piece about mapping out the employee flow. Do I have a good handle on my employee's journey? And am I meeting my employees where they are? And that's a phrase that's tossed around quite a bit. So if we want to unpack that a bit, that means providing them guidance, instruction, programs, products, solutions when they're most needed. And so there's a very topic of conversation that is bubbling right now in the insurance space, and it's around embedded insurance. And there's a multiple definitions of this. We're seeing it a lot where non-insurance entities are providing programs. You might have seen where the dealerships are now providing auto insurance, or you see Airbnb getting involved in trip insurance. None of this ever used to happen. There was always a bifurcation between a product and an insurance, but folks are seeing that at the point of risk, and thus insurance, it's top of at the point of need, risk and insurance is top of mind. So I think about, you say, well, what does that have to do with this? You just talked about consumers. Well, what about presenting programs to your employees when they need them? So if there was some type of trip cancellation coverage that you added and you had employees, a mechanism in which they needed to take PTO and they needed to log their PTO. Many times when they're logging PTO, they're going on trips. So are you able to present that in the flow? About a lot of their life cycles, getting married or having children. When their children are turning certain ages. When they're
even buying a home where they do need to do employment verification on here, right? I mean, those are life events that are happening in that particular moment where they're going to need a particular product.
Correct. And again, there's statistics out there that Gen Zs and the Gen Xs, which we just talked about, they're very much included in purchasing insurance as part of a service or part of a transaction or part of we'll call it a life event. Nobody thinks about buying insurance just because they want to go out and buy insurance. This is actually my quote, said nobody ever, but right, I have extra dollars. When have you ever gone out and said, oh yeah, we want to go buy more insurance? Never.
That should have been a poll.
Yeah. And then, so the last piece, you don't have to do all this. It's a lot, right? There's a lot to think about. In the perfect world, to meet everybody's needs, there'd be a product menu of 25, 30 different programs. Could do that, but I would challenge. There's a lot of folks that go through what's the word when they say you basically freeze up. You think about it so much that you don't do anything. paralysis through analysis, I think
Yes.
is what it is. Yes.
Yes.
You have to get started, and you have the data, and there's no doubt in my mind that employees are demanding it. And if you bring them a program, it doesn't necessarily have to be that you're paying for it. It just has to be that you thought about them and you wanted to put yourself in their shoes in their moment when they were this age or that age, or buying a home or having a kid, and really creating the best experience. I think it'll pay dividends. And again, we focused here on the employee benefit aspect of it, but there's a ton of other things in the full HR life cycle on the tools that you're providing that employee to work remotely, if that's what they're working, and the collaboration tools to more effectively work with their teammates on projects. All of those things boil into the user experience. So we're coming up on the end of the hour. I don't know if we have any other questions.
So we do, Mark. Actually, we have two more. Are there any tools out there that let us compare our talent data to that of our competitors?
There are tools, and I guess it depends on what aspects of talent we're looking to compare. If it's talking about like compensation data, for sure. If it's talking about, I guess user experience, like ranking experience within a company, I don't know of that currently. I'm sure it exists, and if it doesn't exist and it has a big enough need, the InsurTech space is really good at solving for big problems, and so there's probably a tool out there. Without knowing the details of it, I'm not sure. But feel free, if you're here as a result of being invited by somebody from NFP, feel free to reach out to them, and they'll whisper down the lane, and we can open up the conversation.
Terrific. You took the words out of my mouth. That's great. And then the last question we have is, how can NFP and NFP Connect help solve this complex problem and support HR leaders in the process? How will this make the employee experience better?
Listen, I would love to give a shameless pitch for those of you that are online that don't know.
That was an anonymous attendee, so I
Yeah.
can't.
I mean, I'm all good with that. But if you see at the bottom, InsurChoice and NFP Connect, those are platforms that we've built with the premise around personalization, data aggregation, and to be a better partner when it comes to engaging our employer groups and their employees and their associates. So we'd love to have the conversations with y'all. Again, if you've been invited by somebody from NFP, please feel free to reach out to them. If you haven't, you just saw it on LinkedIn or something. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, as many of Sue and many of the others here on the team. So please reach out. We'd love to talk to you about it. We're always looking for people that want to hear about some new stuff we're cooking up.
Absolutely. And I have to laugh because in the chat, someone said, sounds like a planted question. And I swear it wasn't. Okay. But I think, no, this was great. So we'll close this out. Mark and Justin, thanks for an awesome presentation. There was a lot of great information. I also want to thank all of you who joined us today, and in particular for your participation in the poll questions. We really love to have these interactive as opposed to just listening, although you and Mark, you and Justin are, very riveting, but it's great to have our participation. So thank you. And obviously, this is a quickly evolving landscape, and we'll be, continuing to provide you education, updates, information as these trends evolve. So thank you again, everybody, and really appreciate your time. And we'll be scheduling the next Breaking Benefits program shortly. So be on the lookout for the next invitation. So stay well, everyone.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks all.